Philippine President-elect Ferdinand Marcos Junior has made his position clear in his country's territorial dispute with China. Marcos says that he will uphold an international ruling against Beijing over conflicting claims to territory in the South China Sea.
We will not allow a single square, and we even make it smaller, a single square millimeter of our maritime, coastal, and up to our 200 kilometers rights to be trampled upon. And how do we do this? We strengthen our. Well, we're talking when let's not traipse around it. We're talking about China. And how do we do that? We talk to China consistently with a firm voice.
Beijing has ignored a 2016 decision by the Hague-based Permanent Court of Arbitration that declared its historical claim to the waters are baseless. China asserts ownership over almost all of the resource-rich waterway, with competing claims from the Philippines, Brunei, Malaysia, Taiwan and Vietnam. Trillions of dollars in trade pass through the South China Sea every year. Buena Bernal joins us live now for more on this. Buena, Rodrigo Duterte has been less assertive with China during his presidency on perhaps challenging Beijing's moves towards maritime dominance in the South China Sea. How different from Duterte is Marcos Jr.'s stance on this 2016 landmark victory?
Incoming Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr.'s fresh comments on the Philippines' territorial rights over the West Philippine Sea, which is how the Philippines calls its territory in the larger disputed South China Sea, does seem on the surface to veer away from what oppositionists call a policy of appeasement towards China that has been employed by the current administration of President Rodrigo Duterte. Mr. Marcos said, among others, that the 2016 Permanent Court of Arbitration ruling that invalidated China's 9-line claim is, quote, an important ruling, and that he will use that to assert the Philippines' rights. Mr. Duterte, on the other hand, has sought warmer ties with Beijing, but China, on the other hand, has actually responded with continuing deployment of maritime assets on key territories within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. But to an extent, Mr. Marcos Jr.'s comments are also reflective of the kind of mixed messages we've heard from Mr. Duterte and what analysts call underdog defeatist statements, because like Mr. Duterte, Mr. Marcos Jr. said that the Philippines cannot go to war with China, sounding off the same justification that Mr. Duterte has repeatedly used as to why he refuses to raise the 2016 ruling that largely favored the Philippines. Former Philippine Foreign Affairs Secretary Albert Del Rosario, who was part of the team that actually secured that historic ruling, has welcomed this statement by Mr. Marcos Jr., but says war is never an option in the first place, and additionally urged Mr. Marcos Jr. to, number one, consistently raise the ruling before the UNGA, which President Duterte did in 2020. Number two, gather the support of other states that support the ruling. Number three, make China accountable to what he called environmental crimes, including reported coral damage and also reported waste dumping. But finally, he also said that the Philippines should, in the first place, strengthen its defense capabilities, ensuring kind of a credible minimum defense posture that will ward off intruders. And the Philippines Defense Secretary Delfin Lorenzan has actually said that the Philippines has only achieved a quarter of that goal as of 2020.
Buena, thank you for that. Buena Bernal there in Manila.